Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Sunday, August 31st or thereabouts, and we are doing a hangout to talk about the mission statement of the compassionate economy as one of the objectives, and I'm sure other objectives will surface over the course of conversation. And we have with us today Phelan. Phelan, welcome.
Thanks.
Alrighty. So in talking about the mission statement, let's just kind of brainstorm it. I think that might be as good a place to start as any, which is to say, what are some of the elements or characteristics that we want to see in the compassionate economy, not just version 1.0, which we're creating right now, but successive versions in the future. Essentially, what is the aim that we want to aspire to and have that as kind of our true north or direction? So let's just start putting some ideas out there. So, for example, basic human needs. A compassionate economy is one that ensures that basic human needs are met, like, and when I say food, it doesn't mean that, the government or the wealthy or whatever should forever pay for all the food that everyone else is going to eat in the world for the rest of their lives. It simply means having a baseline of basic nutrition, at the level of, like rice, beans, basic nutrients is guaranteed for all. That doesn't mean everyone's just going to be freeloading off of the system. So, and I feel like we're going off into a tangent already, but there's really an important distinction between communism and having a baseline. But I think the two can easily be confused. If I'm saying, there should be food, we should guarantee food, blah, 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 that could sound communist, but really what it means is if someone is hungry, there will be a place where they can go and eat.
Well, an interesting thing is how you're deciding to go about it. So communism decided, despite its ideals, it decided that it was going to plunder from people, whether they wanted it or not, and of course take their cut, which is how it went off into the weeds. But then it decided it's going to take from people, it's going to force people to be charitable, and that never works.
Yeah.
The reason I think, the thing that I think sets the economy out, and it's good that you're bringing this up in the public, something that's been discussed usually in academia and by people who unfortunately have not gained much popularity, but it's spread through the culture, and I think you're bringing it to the forefront. You said a government could guarantee this for people. Well, what is a government but supposedly our collective will? What is government but a group of other people? If you break everything down, it's just people helping or hurting, but in this case, helping other people. So if people are just going to help other people, why not just take out the middleman and do it yourself? So compassion, I think your compassionate economy idea, of course, it's all predicated on the necessity that people are compassionate. And I think the majority of people are compassionate. Empathy is part of human nature. Or at least it's part of human nature of most people, and where it's not, that's where we see conflicts. But I think enough people exist quite easily to make sure to do the footwork themselves to ensure that the people that you mentioned have a baseline in calories or a baseline in nutrients or micronutrients or such. I think what we're kind of getting on is that there are enough people that if we simply get our hesitation out of the way and take direct action to fix something, it will very much get fixed.
At the level of people, individuals taking direct action as opposed to institutions, which could be nonprofit organizations, governments, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the thing is, that might work well for if we're walking down the street and we see a homeless person who's begging, and we dip into our pocket and give them a couple of bucks. That's direct action, right? But that doesn't help the people who are starving in other continents, in poor countries where there are no rich people walking by to dip into their pocket. And B, it creates a situation where individuals have to sit and humiliate themselves and beg in public in high traffic areas, whether it's cars or pedestrians or otherwise, and we see it all over the place now.
Yeah.
Very, very sad. Why not have an organized system using the flyby network, using food banks, homeless shelters, et cetera, housing for the poor, or whatever, and so that they don't have to go around begging. and people have to, constantly make decisions in every single moment. What direction action? If there's all these people suffering all around me, what direction action do I need to take now? I mean, yes, that would be a characteristic of the compassionate economy, but I think another characteristic should be organized efforts to ensure that this baseline is automatically taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we don't have to go around reaching into our pocket every 5 minutes. Anyway, I don't know if I went off on even the wrong tangent there. Did that address what you were bringing up, or where were you going with that?
That is basically, and automatically, well, of course, we're not robots, but this, I think a thing that people don't realize is that on some level, and of course the fact that I'm using a webcam technology I had absolutely nothing to do with the invention of, eating food that I didn't harvest, right? The fact that I'm alive, even right now, is sort of a proof that there is a baseline net of goodness in people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say automatically, it's because you can basically guarantee that there is a baseline, and that baseline, just by being there, that baseline of empathy, will end up in these people being taken care of by the actions of people who choose to channel that empathy. So another tangent, I'm not sure if this is going to get into compassionate economy version 2 or beyond, but stop and think about any given person who's suffering, or any person who's starving, or a person who's begging. Right? Let's take an entire village that's starving. Somewhere on the edges of the Sahara, right? An entire village that's starving. You got to ask yourself, why are they starving? Nobody wants to be starving, so how did they end up in that situation? And the homeless man, for example, how did he end up homeless in the first place, right? When I considered leaving my job, I considered what people would think of me if I ended up becoming a bum, right? People also have a need to make sure that someone who's going to be charitable and give, I believe also has a need to make sure that their giving is going to make a difference.
What are you getting at, Phelan? I don't know where you're going with all this.
Oh, I'm just saying, I think compassionate economy will be reinforced if there's also a measured ability to make sure that that dollar you went up and just gave a bum on the street is going to be a dollar that's going to get him off the street.
Well, that gets to my point. Dollars given out on the street like that are an extremely inefficient and probably in most cases counterproductive, because most of that money probably goes straight to drugs. On the other hand, we have an institutional solution to the problem. But banks, homeless shelters, housing for the poor, education, healthcare, yada, 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 as institutions. And we're not counting on just individual actions here and there, random, here's a couple of bucks, and the only currency is money. If someone's hungry, give them food. Don't give an aggressive bum cash, because they'll just be able to buy more drugs or whatever.
Yes.
That's my point. I mean, so anyway, but I'm still trying to find out what you're getting at with all this.
Basically, I think tech will be strong, and I think we're just trying to define a mission statement. Tech will be strong, or compassionate economy.
Can you define tech for people so they know?
I'm sorry, I keep messing up the order of the acronym. The compassionate economy, TCE. So the compassionate economy idea will be strong, and the movement will be strong. If, as you keep mentioning, there's a measured plan. There's a way to actually measure that what we do, what anybody who is charitable through the compassionate economy does, has a lasting effect. I think as long as that's a principle, the compassionate economy idea will spread and be durable, as I keep mentioning in other discussions. I'm not sure if we can sum this up into one mission statement, but I think it's some general things that we're getting at is, people who wish to be charitable through the compassionate economy should just begin taking action specifically now that we've established a network and have begun establishing a program through which they can do it. Should begin taking direct action in order to solve things that they view are problems. So take direct action in order to begin solving hunger, for example. Individuals taking action and actually measuring that it gets what they want to get done will result in the realization of their goals. And I think compassionate economy taps into people's desire to have that happen, as you and I discussed last Wednesday and since.
So direct action.
Yeah.
So I'm getting direct action, measurability.
Yes, those two are critical.
Okay. All right. And But in terms of the aims, like, I mean, what kind of world do we aspire to live in that will be the result of implementing a compassionate economy? So in other words, to define the compassionate economy and its foundations and its principles, I'm suggesting an iterative way to get there, which is to start with the aim, where we want the world to get to, and then we can say, okay, what do we need to facilitate that aim? And that'll help define the compassionate economy. So why don't we start with the aim? Like, what kind of world do we want to live in?
Well, to attract a lot of people to this, of course, the aim has to be general enough, such that you're not, picking out specific issues that people have problems with and, possibly alienating them because of that.
Right. So let's not. So rather than focus on what it shouldn't be, why don't we just actually brainstorm what the aim could or should be?
So my personal ideas, the aim should be as to what the compassionate economy should achieve.
Yeah, and forget about the economy for the moment. What do we want life on Earth to look like? Say, in the year 2020.
Well, that's a bigger question, but that's easier. In some ways,
that'll inform us what kind of institutions or what kind of economy we need in order to get there.
Well, personally, I mean, of course, I built up a large register of this over the years. Personally, I would like to see people inside communities start caring about the infrastructure and institutions more. You got to care about what your schools are doing. You got to care about how water gets around the community. You got to care about how your roads are made. Just a real quick tangent here. I see people burning up millions of brain calories being pissed off about traffic. Well, if you're pissed off about the traffic, why didn't you give your input when your country or when your county was going to put in a road? So people need to get involved in their infrastructure. I would like to see people more involved in the decisions about their collective resources, their water, their roads, etc., their local politics, and administration of their schools, all that sort of stuff. People got to get involved and start forming their communities. That's one big thing. In general, I'd like to see... Oh, what's that?
So people caring and involved.
Yes.
In everything spanning their infrastructure, their institutions, their schools, communities, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yep.
People.
You might be able to sum this as people need to, this is cliche, but it's true, get involved in their communities, because a person defines a community, and there's all this stuff inside there, and getting involved is talking about any little node inside that community, infrastructure or whatnot.
Yeah. So, I would also say for people to, to have the bandwidth to care and be involved. I'd like to see a world where people have, free time and leisure time.
Yes. Yes.
Because with free time and leisure time, they will have the bandwidth to care and to get informed and to get involved. I think what we see in way too many cases are people just getting way too busy on baseline stuff that they consider to be baseline. Having a job, maintaining that job, doing shopping, owning a house and a couple of cars and maintaining all of that, and we kind of a big part of the American dream revolves around acquiring all this stuff and servicing it. So much of our lives.
In the end, that takes away from the dream.
Pardon me?
But in the end, that takes away from the dream. Because was the American dream ever to own cars, or was the American dream to enjoy yourself? I think it was the latter, and we start getting distracted by the trappings of it.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So.
Yep. We forgot the third one.
Right. And so I would say, yeah, having free time, having leisure, obviously basic human needs universally met across all people all around the world.
Yep.
And
I don't want anybody to lack for anything, just to get clear about that. I don't want anybody to lack for anything for want of opportunity, as in if they're willing, if they've shown in any way, if given a small opportunity, that they'll grab onto it. I want them to at least get that first opportunity that can get them on the path to to finally becoming productive.
Okay, so let's just say we want opportunity to be part of. Okay, so opportunity. We're just kind of brainstorming here. What are things that we want for humanity, that we want for the world?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say I would throw in the word abundance. We want there to be an abundance, which is kind of like the lack of scarcity, the opposite of scarcity, because I think where people perceive scarcity, that creates anxiety, and I think it creates neurotic behavior and and fear, and so if we live in a world where there is just naturally where there is abundance, and so when I say abundance, for example, there are within within a quarter mile of any place in any urban area, there will be a place where you can go and eat. I mean, just period. Right, so if a 17-year-old is doing a walkabout and exploring the world, taking that opportunity to explore the world, creating that leisure time for himself or herself to explore, then they will know that wherever they go exploring, they're taken care of. Right, it's kind of like like when you're on a cruise ship or something. And just like all the food is taken care of, all the housekeeping and everything. I mean, you can just loaf around and swim and eat and drink and play ping pong and do whatever you want. Everything is taken care of. So I think that's kind of the part of the utopia, or part of the aim, is that there be abundance and people aren't walking around in fear, living from hand to mouth. Am I going to make it? Am I going to have enough to eat? Is my family going to have enough to eat? Are my relatives okay? This constant, servicing of scarcity, I think is something that is at the root of it. Anyway, but the opposite of that is abundance. So it boils down to abundance being one of the things that should be our aim. And in fact, some people talk about the post-scarcity era, and that we're entering an era of post-scarcity. That should be part of the aim, I think.
Yeah, I think the only danger, and I was once very firmly on the side of this, then I railed against it. Now I'm once again sort of in the middle. As the one guy at the MJBA meeting pointed out, the one danger possibly of having a post-scarcity economy is that you would allow the existence of a lot of people who, who don't necessarily put back in. They continue consuming but don't put out. And now, once again, I was once on the hardcore Republican side where I said welfare is terrible, etc., until I met some people who actually needed welfare. So this is where I balanced out here. The reason I left it at an opportunity is because, if people get an opportunity to do something, it will create scarcity is good, but only if it's a phantom, only if it happens once and it doesn't grind people into dust. Just like challenges are good if you're not crushed under challenges. I want to make sure people aren't essentially crushed. If they're given too free a rein, they will. Heck, this is like in the growing of cannabis. If you give it too much fertilizer, they'll grow leggy and unhealthy. If you give a person too much abundance, they won't understand that at some level, a struggle had to be made in order to make that stuff. And at the same time, you might end up with the sort of people who would end up polluting because they think that the world has absolutely no bounds, right? And they start, dumping stuff back into the local river or such, and you don't want that. People need to understand there's a cycle, there's a push and a pull, and for everything you do, it must be taken care of. And that takes effort. And to learn effort, that takes a lesson. So I think I don't exactly know where that plays into what you were saying. I just want to bring up the other side of that.
I hear you loud and clear. So basically, in my mind, there should definitely be, a baseline of the meeting of basic human needs that we guarantee that people will not fall below that baseline threshold. And so, the basic nutrients is one that no one would argue about. Basic shelter, I think, is one that's pretty uncontroversial.
Mhm.
And I mean, for example, we're going to be through all these efforts that we're talking about, feeding centers will be established in various places throughout the world. People will gravitate towards those feeding centers. Do we want them just, squatting on the ground without any kind of shelter? No, let's throw in shelter.
Mhm.
And likewise, basic health care, likewise, education, etc. So just kind of building from there, and we get to this minimum baseline. From there, if people are ambitious and they want to, work and develop and get above that, first of all, I think that is an ambition is a basic human attribute, which
Mhm.
which is expressed when people's basic needs are met, and they're not operating in a fearful, neurotic state, right?
True.
So by creating that baseline for humanity, we can minimize the number of people who are in this hand-to-mouth, fearful, neurotic state of existence,
Mhm.
and maximize the number who are in a healthy place to develop their ambition. Well, what else? Right now, I want to learn. Now, I want to explore. Now, I want to work. Now, I want to have, a better home for myself and my family than this communal place, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you for the baseline. And thank you for the opportunity now for myself and my children to get an education, and for us to be able to, now take these various other opportunities that are put in front of us. And so we've already identified opportunity as one of the pillars of what we want to aim for,
Mhm.
compassionate economy. And so, anyway, abundance is one. It's kind of a tricky one because there can be, like you pointed out, there can be pitfalls to providing too much abundance for free,
Mhm.
right, to people. And so, where do we define that baseline? And uh, and you know, and then for all the surplus above that baseline, you know, how do we define what happens with that? Do we define it? Do we just, to what extent? I mean, because here's the thing. It is so, I think, ingrained not just in humans but in pretty much all biological species, with perhaps a few exceptions. The uh, the drive to accumulate and store and save and build and protect and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
People have that, and so private property um, uh, rights address that need and are consistent with that need. What we've identified is that the main thing that's missing from the capitalistic economy is compassion. So we're introducing that,
Mhm.
creating the compassionate economy. So so it's kind of like there's a lot of stuff that basically works in the American system in terms of private property and laws and whatnot. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work, and so now we're essentially saying, okay, let's take this foundation of the Constitution, and what else do we need to, add to that, basically, in order to.
Having thought about this a lot, my dad was the sort of guy who would rant about this for a long time, so he forced me to think about it. Um, I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say that even my dad would be the sort of guy who would not mind taking his 2 acre, or however many acres he has now, taking his multi-acre parcel of land and chopping it up and giving it to, let's say, some multinational group of refugees was just dropped near his home, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like no explanation, no government explanation or anything. He just has to live with it. My dad is the sort of guy who, after being kind of confused for a little while, would go, you know what, the you family over there from India, I'll cut this part off and I'll take that. Because after vetting those people, he would say, this is a productive person. All these people need is a little bit of help. Actually, he's done this. He's helped out a lot of our relatives throughout even my life, right? He's brought them out here and tried to set them up with places. And yet at the same time, he's the sort of person who argued very vehemently for private property rights. I think to kind of sum this up, nobody owns land. Nobody owns land sort of in the Native American sense. And I think everybody, even the landowners that argue for that, are aware of that on some level, right? Why do you get to own this land and somebody doesn't?
Yeah.
I think what they basically want is to make sure that they have a say in making sure that their values are realized in how people use that land and how people are distributed in the area around them. And once again, this is why I keep on just surrendering all this stuff back to compassion, right? Their compassion will lead the way in the end. They don't want to lock down their personal property. They just want to make sure that their values can be realized as they decide to provide their stuff, as they decide to take the fruits of their labor and give it out to other people.
Yeah.
In order to see the world turn into a good place.
You're basically advocating for people being able to take their private property, do with it as they wish, and as they have that freedom to do that, that people like your father will, be generous. Obviously, not everyone is going to be generous, like Dad, and so, so bottom line, I mean, other than articulating what kind of the way things ought to be and sort of some sort of ideal, I mean, are you citing that as an attribute of the aim of the compassionate economy? Is a world where more people are more like your dad, or what? I mean, I'm just trying to get to what's your main point there with all this?
I guess if I was to distill it down, it would be to say this. I think the compassionate economy should count on the fact that there are enough good people to make what it wants to have happen. I'm trying to figure out how our tangent gets back to the main point, but basically, I suppose that's the only point. The idea of the compassionate economy functioning and working, this program and its success actually being achieved is, a majority of people in the world, or enough people to resolve all the problems, do actually have compassion in their hearts. And that is something people argue about this almost to the point of punching each other. That is something you simply have to believe. If you don't believe that, then the world becomes a zero-sum game, and you might as well just dig a ditch, crawl into it, bury yourself, and die, right? There have to be enough good people. That's just what you have to believe.
No, actually, what's interesting is I came to the same conclusion that that's a foundational piece, but through a different route, which is that in order to engage on this topic of the compassionate economy version 1.0 and the 0.1% contribution for ending world hunger, for all of that to work, it presupposes that as human beings, we want that. We want to be generous, whether as a consumer or as a company making the voluntary contribution. It presupposes that, a majority of us, or at least a critical mass of us, enough of us. And how do you define enough? I somewhat arbitrarily use the number 1/3. If 1/3 of the economy, gets on the platform of the compassionate economy version 1.0 and makes that 0.1% contribution, boom, we end world hunger. There's a lot of details in between, but look at it. And so I essentially started off with the axiomatic notion that there are a critical mass of good people with generosity and compassion who want to see this happen, and focused on creating a mechanism to allow that to be expressed. That deep, unexpressed consumer need, let that be the driver from a marketing standpoint of the compassionate economy, and essentially force the hand of business. Yeah, go ahead.
No, this is a great point. I think I kind of see a mission statement coming out of this. I was just going to note here, this is probably a really good soundbite to file away somewhere. There is no faster way to turn a compassionate person into a stingy person than to tell them that they have to be compassionate, to try to force them to be compassionate. And actually, that dovetails with what you were saying. You said this will just help people realize. Maybe that can be the core of some kind of mission statement and just an ideology such that you and any other people who are in charge or involved in this understand in their actions. This isn't about, this is what I was thinking. As part of the message to the public, any charity like this sort of feels like somebody's trying to guilt them or tell them to do something.
Yeah.
This, if you express to them that you're not guilting them, that you're saying, we believe that there is good in you. Do you just want to see that good find its way into the world? We're trying to provide a highly integrated platform to make sure that your good finds its way to goodness very quickly. That will take this whole sort of Judeo-Christian guilt thing that a lot of people in America have, and it'll just dissolve it. Talk about getting people from the first to the third step.
Brilliant. And so, in fact, yeah, I would say this is one thing that will characterize the compassionate economy as an aim, is the existence of mechanisms which essentially create win-win scenarios where compassion and generosity are naturally expressed. And so, I mean, so for example, you know, the whole design of the compassionate economy version 1.0 is based on precisely that premise. Let's create a series of mechanisms that constitute win-win scenarios. So the first companies who sign up to be compassionate companies and pioneer the compassionate economy, they get a massively disproportionate share of the media coverage of the compassionate economy. So in an extreme, a tiny little startup that maybe will do $20,000 in revenue this year, 0.1% of that is $20. So for a payment of $20 to their favorite charity, which is dedicated to ending hunger, they get a press conference, they get all this follow-up media coverage, the video about them goes viral because of compassion. So I mean, the economics are just, it becomes the most profitable investment a small company could possibly make. So you have small progressive companies in a progressive industry, the cannabis and hemp industry, deriving massive benefits from pioneering a compassionate model. And then that in turn inspires other businesses to get on board and in turn derive benefits for themselves. So even if it comes from a, sort of a greedy, motive for many companies. I'm not saying for all companies or even the majority, but it's kind of like you provide training wheels. You leverage greed and capitalism as training wheels to get onto a compassionate path, and it's win-win at every step of the way. So I think
that's a great point. I kind of wanted to say this just real quick. I wanted to say this to one of the people that was on the call yesterday. Right, I had to I had to get myself out of this thought process for a while too. Who cares how it's getting done, so long as it's getting done and people aren't being hurt in the process? So who cares how the values and the actual money and resources are getting to good people, and who cares how the values of action are spreading? If a large company that we don't quite agree with is signing on to it, well, they're helping that along. So in that respect, they are my ally. Not sure we can quite pithily wrap this into a mission statement, but it might be something for you to file away as a guiding principle about this and something to educate people on, right? In one way, if they are helping with this, they are our ally. So, don't make the good be the enemy at the best.
Our chief philosophy officer summarizes it very well in saying, align with the opponent. So even if you identify, Halliburton as the opponent, right? If Halliburton makes the contribution, the 0.1% contribution, they deserve the designation, just as a very progressive green company might, right? And so align with the opponent. So, but I think we're onto a very fundamental principle here, and I think you articulated it well. With who cares how you get there? Well, of course we do care how we get there. We want it to be a compassionate path. But I mean, what could be more compassionate than having a transparent plan that makes sound business sense for all participants and returns enormous benefits to all humanity and helps create this platform that we've been talking about, which in turn will be a platform for all kinds of economic growth and prosperity and health and happiness and eliminating starvation at anywhere near the scale we see it today, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, how could any of that be wrong? And it's totally transparent and it's completely voluntary. I mean, it's the alignment of so many fundamentally good principles into one single aim, and that's really the topic of today's hangout. which is, what should our aim be, and therefore what should the mission of the compassionate economy be, and that'll guide us. But so we're kind of bringing together different components or different elements of the aim and where we want to get to, which is great. We do this in the brainstorming process. But this principle that you talked about I'm just visualizing it as, it's as a pathway, right? We're in a sense we're sort of like corralling livestock in an analogy, right? But in a very gentle way, rather than poking and prodding. We're more just kind of like waving and gesturing. They can still go in any direction that they want, but through the through all of our efforts in our communications and conversations, including the dimensionally enhanced social network we'll be launching, we're facilitating this very benevolent shepherding. It's really it's kind of like a shepherding function. And actually, this is really profound because rather than try to convince people of a detailed, in-depth philosophy, where they would need to, read the Iliad and spend a week just thinking about that, and then, spend about 3 months in in-depth conversations on all these different topics and essentially become enlightened as to exactly how the whole system works, rather than put that whole burden on, 7.5 billion people. If we can provide think of it as a network, and this is a real business concept, a concept, which is network orchestration. If we can orchestrate this network, sort of this benevolent shepherding, I think one of the fundamental underpinnings of a compassionate economy is that it provides benevolent shepherding of people to do things which are fundamentally generous and compassionate, and to derive enjoyment and benefit from doing those things, right? And the whole Compassionate Economy 1.0, the Compassionate Company program, I hope to be a perfect example of that, right? And that, it enables people to do something where they're gaining, they're benefiting in multiple different ways, and they get to be generous and compassionate and experience the joy that comes from that, and the satisfaction and the tapping into that need and feeling that need, that unexpressed consumer need. Whether you're a consumer or a business owner, this mechanism enables you to do that.
I think yours actually probably said it a little better. If we were to make a mission statement out of what I just pasted into chat, that's, of course, you'll want to say, add a little blurb about how it's done, and the nature that this is like a network business operation. You want to include something like that. But as far as what actually we want to get done and what the base goal of it is, that's my best guess estimate about how we'd articulate it if you were going to be really if you were going to boil it down to something sounding very secular.
Okay, for the benefit of listeners, would you do us a favor and read what you pasted there so people can see or hear?
Can people in Google Chat read kind of what's on our tools? Oh, crud. Okay. So I said the goal of this company is, or the goal of the compassionate economy is providing a platform such that people's internal compassion can be realized most effectively. Some key points in this are, we are the platform, the first part, with the goal of such that people's internal compassion, this is kind of like what Jamie was just saying. We're not giving people 100 sutras and telling them to memorize them. We are counting on the fact that enough people will have enough compassion to plug into this, and then can be realized most effectively. Well, we want to make sure that their compassion actually gets out into the real world. And Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the main value adds of the compassionate economy is that people will know through measuring systems, through follow-up, through vetting of charitable organizations, or however we decide to do this, they will be able to know that their money's getting where they want it to go, and that it's producing the most good. Basically, their compassion will be satisfied the most because they feel that they will be satisfying the world the most through whatever mechanisms of transparency we can afford.
Wow. Yeah, no, I really like where you're going with this.
Okay. It was basically a restatement of what you said. I was just trying to process it from my own brain.
No, that's right. That's right. So we're essentially, architecting the economy in such a way through, but it's a transparent architecting. I mean, this whole conversation about architecting the economy is transparent and available for the whole world to see and participate in. But I think crucially, we're not asking everyone to understand it to its full depth. It doesn't require 7.5 billion people all, arriving at the same consensus. Exactly how this whole thing works. We can give people very simple shepherding, very gentle shepherding, like the 0.1%. Hey, be a compassionate company. Even if a company only looks at it from its pure marketing benefit and really doesn't believe and have the full intended effect, but hey, I'll ride the wave, I'll ride the fad while it benefits me, and I'll jump off when it no longer benefits me. Even if they get onto it with that mentality, so what? They're onto it, right? They're using it, they're promoting it, and they're benefiting from it. And great. So it's like, in a way, we're trying to achieve a sort of marriage between enlightened self-interest, or simply perceived self-interest, which is sort of the foundation of the pure capitalist system. Everyone pursues their own selfish interests, and everything will come out in the wash, kind of thing. So we're married.
Assuming compassion is not a selfish interest, but
well, that's a really interesting thing, which is that we're awakening people's need. We're awakening their need, a need that's been there all along, to be compassionate, to be generous. We're awakening. We're helping them to awaken that. And that's really where the transformation happens. The training wheels are for before that transformation. Hey, follow your own greedy interests, right? And you'll make more money. Wow.
I just realized something.
Yeah.
I just realized something.
Yeah.
The need to give is not necessarily any different from a need for me, myself, to eat. It's not necessarily different from the need, I guess that kind of gets in a gray area, that I have of, like I'd like to build a house and make sure I have a stable car. I think I'd like to point something out. Maybe the compassionate economy can finally bring the philosophy into the mainstream of, it's not that there's a set of things that we do that are greedy and a set of things that we do that are compassionate. Let's not even put the two at odds, right? Other people have said this before, but let's actually bring this into the mainstream. Let's take, like you have imagine there's a bulleted list in front of me here. You have the stuff that the person needs to do to survive, and number 5 out of 20 in that list is helping other people. It's just another thing that people want to do throughout their life. You could say, in a way, oh, here's a suggestion for you. People view charities as an ancillary thing, something they try to do above and beyond, right? And that if they do it, they deserve some kind of reward.
Yeah.
But the people that we're targeting, helping people is their own reward. Actually, for the people that really are charitable in the world, helping people is their own reward.
Yeah.
So how about this? Let us say that the compassionate economy is not just some ancillary plug-in into your life that you can kind of do or not. The compassionate economy, you could possibly frame it as taking care of another service that people want to take care of, which is taking care of other people, right? Then you put yourself, I don't want to necessarily make this weird, but I think this is a valid point. You want to put yourself alongside getting your oil changed and getting your groceries and this other stuff, right? The bread and butter that we do every day.
Yeah.
Helping people, for the people for whom it is necessary. It's not everyone, but it's a lot of people. Helping people is another thing that they want to do.
Well, and here's the thing. It's not like that's like number 5 on the list. I see it as actually more fundamental, more profound, more. Here's the thing. I think
I was being glib, but it could be number one for people.
Yeah, no, I know, but here's the point I want to make. I mean, it's like the way that we evolved as humans. We evolved in communities as part of a tribe. We're social creatures. We're fundamentally social creatures, where any notion about it being about us, about me, the individual, just it's so far from who we fundamentally are as human beings. It's like a made-up construct of, I don't know, the 1700s or something.
Yeah. I don't... Oh, shoot, I was going to make a point here.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
It will come back. Yeah, that's a valid point, though.
I mean, it's like this helps us really, truly become human again, right? We have abandoned that tribe, village, unit, group where it's like we're all part of a whole. We're all in this together. We've abandoned that in favor of the suburb and the SUV and the I've got mine, so fuck you, right?
You saying SUV actually brought it right back to my head. Perhaps, Jamin, perhaps the reason we see so much BS in the world nowadays is because people are constantly neglecting the need that they have to help others.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's not the one thing, but that actually might be the core of a lot of interconnected things, and that might be deep down there with the other core issues as to what's causing the misery.
Oh yeah, no, it's because we're completely disconnected from who we are. Who we are connected people, and what we're doing right now by doing this Google Hangout, as opposed to talking on the phone, we're connecting more. By sharing it with the world, we're connecting more. It's like we're standing in the middle of the town square and saying we're creating stone soup. Join us.
Yeah, to any experts who might actually link into this one day, any of the people who've actually come up with that idea, I know you're screaming at your screen saying, oh my gosh, I've been saying this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I guess this is just the path that ideas have to take. They have to find their way into people's heads somehow. So,
yeah. And with what we're doing
let's see if we can speed that up.
Yeah, we're simply creating the training wheels to speed that up. That's what this whole multidimensional story is about. Is speeding that up. And so I think, what we're talking about is we're taking that to a higher level in the sense that we're saying, let's make a fundamental feature of the compassionate economy be precisely this uber feature of training wheels that constantly helps us get back on track. So for example, the 0.1% contribution, which is so small that you'll barely even feel it, if you feel it at all, if you notice it at all, right? That contribution, it's automatic, but it's a constant reminder. I mean, when you look at your monthly budget or quarterly budget, it's there, right? It's a non-trivial, but not a big expense. So it's like, okay, that's there. That's right. We are a compassionate company. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us of that fact. And that we're participants in a compassionate economy, and we identify ourselves as such, right? Because the tangible benefit to the company is they get to project that, they get to share that both internally and externally to all the shareholders and triple bottom line and everything else. It's a training wheel, right?
I'm making some notes here, actually.
Yeah, and so this whole concept of training wheels for a compassionate economy, training wheels for a compassionate world. The compassionate economy itself will ideally be those, railroad tracks, for lack of a better word, that are gently always coaxing the world back to its compassionate self, its compassionate core, right? Reminding itself who it is.
Sorry, I'm still sidetracked on the notes here.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
So you said let's make a fundamental feature of the compassionate economy that
it guides and shepherds people and institutions. Maybe this is a key point, that it guides and shepherds people and institutions. People and institutions towards the compassionate path. Right? The compassionate path, which is the path that we all want to be on anyway. And we're in touch with our wants and our needs and our fundamental desires and drivers. And so what's really interesting here is the economy now, in this new construct, becomes that which guides and shepherds people and groups of people, versus, which is the complete opposite of the traditional model, which is that people and groups of people are who define and drive the economy, right? Where the economy is the effect. People are the cause and the economy is the effect. Here we turn that on its head. The economy is the cause and people are the effect.
You could say this is, just a restatement of what you're saying. It's bringing the economy in line with our human nature, compassion.
Yeah. In fact, it's almost like
with our compassionate nature, you could say.
Another way of saying it is optimizing the symbiosis between the individual and the economy. Because each one drives the other.
You're saying where the economy gives back not necessarily just the goods that the person's looking for, but the goals that they're looking for as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's it. That's optimizing the symbiosis, making the economy a true partner in a person's life, a true partner, and not just a simple machine. Hey, you provide inputs, and then you get currency for those inputs, and then you take that currency and you buy outputs, and that's it. It's the marketplace. No, we're not just the marketplace. The economy and its institutions and its structures and its foundation, the foundation of the economy. Just like this becomes the macrocosm of what we've been doing at the level of the cannabis and hemp industry. The cannabis and hemp industry with eco. Here, let me show people a card of what I'm talking about when I say eco. All right. So ECO is the International Coalition of Cannabis Companies and Organizations. And so what ECO is doing is building the foundational components of the foundation for the global cannabis and hemp industry, the model legal code, the model rules and regulations, international standards, policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Create the foundation at an international level for the cannabis and hemp industry globally. And then we asked ourselves, all right, as we're building this foundation, what do we want to be building this foundation on top of? On top of what bedrock do we want to build this foundation? A little known fact, the reason the island of Manhattan can support so many massive skyscrapers is because right underneath a layer of soil is granite. There is just a massive bedrock of granite underneath Manhattan. So what do we want to be our granite bedrock? And for the cannabis and hemp industry, the answer was obvious: compassion. Now what we're talking about, Phelan, in this conversation is how do we essentially replicate that process, expand that process, use the eco model, and apply it to the entire economy.
The cool thing is the eco model plugs directly into any other companies, any other companies that care to be compassionate.
Exactly.
So, for example, I shop exclusively almost at PCC because that's one of the best grocers in our neighborhood, and there are.
What place? Sorry.
It's called PCC. I actually don't even know what it stands for.
Yeah, no, Pacific Consumer Co-op is what it originally started at, but now it's just.
Oh.
But it might be something else now.
Okay. And I notice a lot of the companies in there, though established and not part of a controversial industry, are very much aligned with the same goals. That might be another place to start. Yeah, we were brainstorming industries yesterday.
The specialty food industry is our very next stop after cannabis and hemp. What did you just say, Fallon? I missed it.
Oh, and of course, yeah, this plugs into any other industry that we were talking about. So, I, quite frankly, I don't. There are very few industries that I can think of that you cannot label compassionate, or at least, once again, that's not trying to label the people inside of them. There's no reason you couldn't work for a porn shop and still be a compassionate person. But not sure that industry as a whole espouses those values, but whatever. I think this redundantly plugs into almost any industry where the people inside of it care, and I guess that's that.
Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing. Just like we are creating a brand new foundation for the cannabis and hemp industry, starting from nothing, essentially, right? So a lot of great components have been built, like the laws and rules and regulations in the state of Washington and the state of Colorado. There are a lot of great stuff we're going to be able to reuse and borrow from and those efforts. But really, we need to think about creating a foundation that will be a model for all other industries for a time, until maybe the specialty food industry then continues with the evolutionary path and creates an amazing, foundation that borrows from the best of the cannabis and hemp industry foundation and goes beyond. And maybe then the cannabis and hemp industry learns from the specialty food industry, and the two become like a dialectic learning machine, each building off of what the other has done. In fact, that whole evolutionary paradigm, I think, is crucial, and not just evolutionary, but at times completely transformational, down to its core, down to its foundation. But for lack of for simplicity's sake, let's simply just call it evolution, right? These foundations in all these different industries are going to be evolving, but I think what we can do in defining the foundation for the compassionate economy is we can help provide a blueprint for an accelerated evolution for all these different industries and all these different foundational components. So, so starting with the cannabis and hemp industry, so one of the parts of the blueprint for having this accelerated evolution is precisely the dimensionally enhanced social network and network brain, which is what we're creating now, which this conversation is now a permanent part of its memory. Right? That's the cool thing. Isn't that just mind-blowing, Phelan? Yeah.
I could see some people who say it's freaky, but I don't know. I don't know if I subscribe to that. I think it's just cool.
Yeah. No, it's so cool. And as we integrate this with the brain and everything else, I mean, it's just going to be amazing. But see, this becomes one of the essential ingredients or essential nutrients which supports the rapid evolution of the foundation, whether of a specific industry or the foundation of the entire economy, right? And so within Eco Talks, we're going to be talking in depth and extensively about compassion and what does it mean for all aspects of the cannabis and hemp industry. So we're essentially going to be realigning the entire cannabis and hemp industry onto a true north of compassion. That's the essence of ECO and of the mission for ECO. And, or at least that's what I believe it should be.
Could you give me some examples of specific things that companies would do that you believe would be aligned? I know you want to discuss what compassionate actually is, but some things that you think right now would be aligned with compassion?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example and interject if this is not hitting the nail precisely on the head. Okay. So, for example, you've got all these new retail stores popping up, selling cannabis legally, and you've got people who can now come in who are over the age of 21 and buy weed in whatever form and go home and use it. I think that what would be most compassionate to consumers and their friends and their families and other people they share the road with and the highway with, what would be most compassionate for all those people is to set a standard for a minimum baseline level of education about cannabis that consumers would need before they can buy any cannabis products.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, even having a 5 to 10 minute conversation with a first-time customer, first-time user, or someone who maybe has smoked in the past but never tried an edible.
Okay.
So, for example, when people eat edibles for the first time, or at any time, it can take 45 minutes, it can take an hour, it can take longer, depending on that person's metabolic pathways and metabolism rates and all kinds of factors. It can take an hour before the person who eats the edible feels anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Anything at all. And that is so far beyond the human experience that even when you tell people this, they still, in probably 75% of cases, will eat a portion of a brownie. They'll wait 15 minutes, and they'll say, you know what, yeah, I was told it would take a while to kick in, but I'm not feeling anything. And it's been a whole
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes. I mean, like, if I had a beer, believe me, I'd be feeling something after like 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
if not after 10 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
right? This ain't beer.
Mm-hmm.
And this ain't smoked weed, where, again, you feel it after a few seconds,
Mm-hmm.
or immediately, right? This is a completely different animal. That needs to be taught to people. So I believe the compassionate thing is to establish a safety standard and an education standard for the industry at the consumer level, where you cannot buy cannabis unless you have taken a baseline level of education and training about cannabis, its different forms, its different uses, its effects, etc. Right?
Okay.
Maybe that should be a half-hour course. I don't know, but uh, people need this basic driver's ed for what to do with this vehicle called cannabis, which can be incredibly powerful and incredibly curative and healing. And beneficial, in so many aspects of health and psychology, et cetera, et cetera. But it can also be quite dangerous, used in ways which are dangerous. And unless you tell the kid that no, that delicious-looking blue flame, don't put your finger in it. As delicious as it looks, don't lick it because you'll get hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't tell them, they'll go stick their fingers in the flame.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways that you can get burnt with cannabis, and you can burn other people. There are ways you can die or kill other people by inappropriate use of cannabis.
So a suggestion when we actually go to discuss this with the cannabis industry, as you're probably planning on, we should all put our happy caps on, and I'll put our honesty caps on, and go at it. Because I can sense that, it's like some people are going to say, oh, Jamin, that is way too overboard. We don't need to tell adults this. But then other people, someone else is going to pipe up and say, but when I was 21 and I first smoked, right, it totally took me by surprise. So there's going to be a good set of ideas in the middle. We're just going to have to get closer and closer and closer to that. And that's going to take a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
And also a lot of people not getting offended.
No, absolutely. Look, the industry is going to fiercely resist this notion of a standard that you must have a certain level of education about the product before you can buy any of it. That inhibits commerce.
They might, but again, you remember from the MJBA meeting, some of the people there were actually the ones calling for some education. I remember when the packaging panel was up there; they were particularly interested in that. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Oh dear, I've drunk too much water.
You need to take a break, or are you okay?
Yeah, I think I should take a little break.
All right, let's take a break for a few minutes, and just come back on screen and speak up when you're back.
Okay. All right, I'll leave controls up to you.
Okay, see you in a few.
Yep. All right, Jamin, I'm back.
Phelan, welcome back.
Cool.
Welcome back. All right. So, where were we?
We were talking about examples of specific compassionate guidelines
Right.
that you were brainstorming.
Yeah, like safety education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, was that a good example? Because for me, that's a good example in the sense that it exemplifies the tension between short-term profit. Hey, let's get in all the new customers now and let's start selling them, and and yeah, we'll have packaging, but the packaging and the labeling, that'll take care of safety. I'm saying, come on, let's be realistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are using weed all over the place, edibles, now they're doing dabs, tincture, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And people are just relying on their friends. And I think where people are missing the boat is, for one thing, on edibles, people are totally missing the boat. The edible experience with cannabis is completely unlike any other experience of eating or ingesting anything, whether it's smoked cannabis, drinking alcohol, eating something sweet. In all those cases, you get the impact immediately. There's an immediacy of cause and effect. I think people need to be sat down and said, look, with edibles, it is not that way. Here's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And until they're actually like, you've got someone's attention and you can actually make that point, then I think the message is going to be lost.
Okay. So how I'm curious about this as a larger program. We can discuss specific things that you think the cannabis industry can do in order to be more compassionate, but would this be a facet of things that companies must do in order to be aligned with ECO?
See, I would propose yes.
Okay.
I would propose to be eco-certified, you have to be compassionate across these different dimensions. One of those dimensions is customer safety, right? Another is worker safety, right? Another is yada, 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 and all on down the line. So that's part of developing the standards and rules and model rules and regulations for the cannabis and hemp industry, right? And so, but see, to develop all that, we have the conversations on ecotox. And in fact, part of this hangout will be put into one of those, conversation threads on ecotox. And so that whole infrastructure of ecotox, the dimensionally enhanced social network, becomes the mechanism by which this foundation is created. It's created out of conversations.
So getting out of protocol for a sec, I just want to let you know a tangent that's kind of on my mind.
Yeah.
It sort of sounds like if we have enough of these, they replace government regulation. As in, I'm not saying this is something that should be on the short-term menu, but it's like, if people are making their own rules and they're good rules, and the market's responding to these good rules, why do you need a volume that thick of specific safety and worker and education and labeling regulations, right? Between us and the government, it should be who gets taxed what and who gets to put stuff where, and maybe not even the second one. It kind of seems like this could even replace that in the long term. Just a thought.
Well, it's a very good point, and this is something we've discussed quite a bit with that. To the extent that we do this and we get out in front of the need for these regulations, and we self-regulate, we create the standards and we stick to them as an industry or as members of ECO, that the government will not have the need to come in and try to create a whole bunch of regulations on its own. So this is completely in alignment with that. And it's also consistent with the whole voluntary nature, right? Businesses that become eco-compliant, eco-certified, those businesses, the customers will know those are safe businesses to go to. And there's a very high bar of safety that they're going to be treated well. and they're going to be, their safety is going to be absolutely respected. And does that make the process slower? Absolutely. I mean, you can't just go in and buy a bunch of weed and then drive off someplace and go enjoy it. You first need to show that you have undergone the necessary training.
But that's what we want the ecosystem to represent, the fact that somebody slowed down and took the time and also took compassionate considerations into consideration.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Slow down, we're in a hurry. Slow down, I'm in a hurry.
So I'm curious, do you think stuff like this would apply to, I think the cannabis industry, I think this is basically a slam dunk for that. Do you think this establishing compassionate guidelines would also work? Let's take the next low-hanging fruit, the compassionate food industry. I'm sorry, the specialty food industry. Do you think that we would also establish some sort of pattern there? And for food, rules can get very, very, very specific. Do you think we might, be able to keep it to something high level, like adheres to certain levels of worker safety and, adheres to certain levels of, I guess you could say, like organic production or whatnot? But whatever the specifics turn out to be, there would be the same level of rules for any other industry that decides to have its own compassionate international organization assigned to it as well.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. And here we're talking about a lot of very specific things which constitute those, training wheels or guideposts, or the fundamental structure of the compassionate economy. We want to be guiding people and companies and human activity towards a compassionate path. Right? Now that may sound like control and manipulation and all that. I mean, if it sounds like that, I'm sorry, but we're talking about a future here that we want to create. What do we want to create? Well, we want to have a world that's compassionate. I don't know a way to have that without taking some positive action and communicating some things and impacting some people's minds and their decisions. It's not just going to happen automatically. So, we're talking about how do we guide people and institutions towards the compassionate path, right? One way is by creating the compassionate economy version 1.0, the 0.1% contribution. That's a guide, right? That's something that you're creating a door and you're saying you're welcome to walk through that door, right? So are we guiding them? Yes, we're guiding them. Are we guiding individuals? Yes, we're guiding individuals. We're saying please develop a preference for goods and services produced by compassionate companies, right? And please get involved in some of the compassionate volunteer activities, such as becoming a flyby volunteer, making deliveries for the hungry, things like that. We're creating doors and inviting people to voluntarily walk through those doors. So likewise, I'm just kind of expanding that to a more broad general principle, which is that the compassionate economy be characterized by a whole system, a whole ecosystem of such guideposts and doors and incentives and voluntary choices that people and companies can take that will put them on a more compassionate path. And that's in alignment with their interests as a company or their interests as an individual.
I think this will, I have some notes for you that I want to take out of discussion, but I think I do think that this idea pans out well, same as yesterday. In the beginning, something like, I don't know exactly how the program called The Compassionate Economy is specifically associated with these, but the compassionate economy, for example, has a strong benefit for the people who pay the price. Basically, the price 0.01%, or I'm sorry, 0.1%, and the immediate benefit is brand recognition, and that's good. So, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at here is, at any given point, people would like their back scratched, and people would like their back scratched in an immediate sort of way. Of course, the programs that you and I are coming up with right now, have long-term benefits and the establishment of good values, which will eventually come back around to benefit the people who support them. But do you think people will have two questions here, I guess. Do you think people will have the attention span to go through all the pain that something like ECO puts on them with certifications and such, and the possible slowdown of their market? Basically, why would they go through that? What do you think, is there a more immediate benefit that could be provided to them that I'm missing here?
Yeah. So, here's an idea. Here's a thought. The immediate benefit is become a compassionate company. Join one of the press conferences that we do where we highlight those companies which have recently become compassionate companies. Get that big media PR benefit, marketing, branding benefit as a compassionate company. Number two, participate in the conversations about what will constitute a compassionate cannabis and hemp industry. And one of the conversations is on safety. Participate in that conversation. We believe that training should be something that we should have a standard where customers must go through certain training and education before being able to buy any cannabis products. Say so, if you believe that's a good thing. Or maybe it should only be for people who are, I don't know, under the age of 30, or I don't know what, or maybe have different levels of requirements in terms of education. But let's have that conversation. Or if you don't think there should be any such requirement at all, it shouldn't be mandated, it should be made available, just like, nutrition information is made available to customers of McDonald's, but not everyone is forced to take, a quiz and, memorize how many calories are in a Big Mac, buy a Big Mac, right? So, do we want, the very fact that this is a self-regulating thing, companies can voluntarily choose to be a part of ECO or not, to be ECO certified or not. Not every produce company has to be certified organic. But for people who want to know that they're getting the absolute safest cannabis at all levels of the experience, including education, then you want to go, you want to buy your product from an eco-certified retailer.
So this is something where, I guess I would call them sub-organizations like ECO or Compassionate Specialty Foods Organization, etc. These smaller sub-organizations, attention would be directed to them. I'm also trying to figure the time between this and compassionate economy. So attention will be directed to them by this hot button issue that you have right now called compassionate economy. So that will serve in the near term, and that will be its own brand. But that will also direct attention to these long-term and more durable things, which will serve as their own redundant branding ? So there'll be compassionate economy branding and also an eco branding. Compassionate economy is the whole thing. Eco, Specialty Foods Organization, Specialty Manufacturers Organization, these are the sub-organizations. And the benefits, so just to ask a question first, that is sort of the interplay between compassionate economy and eco and any of eco's siblings, is that correct?
Absolutely, That eco become a model for its siblings in other industries, and that eco talks become a model of the kinds of conversations that will drive and facilitate and orchestrate the development of the foundation for the cannabis and hemp industry, and likewise for all these other industries. And
so a benefit here, go ahead.
No. And before we create the siblings to ecotox in other industries, we just have this umbrella network of spectral radius for starters, where we by default discuss everything and the entire compassionate economy at a holistic level.
Yeah, I think that's necessary. You need a central place to put this knowledge, an organized central place. Central archive for all this knowledge. Because nothing kills productivity like repeating the same points over and over again. As far as, I guess to drive home the question one more time though, so take ECO for example, and companies who ascribe to it. Say they were already part of compassionate economy, and that separate discussion we have, we've started libraries for that. We started like an online voting system. The infrastructure for it is rolling along, and it's actually starting to do some good. So that's it. And say it's got like, 50 to $100 million in operating revenue. So it's picking up steam. And then we take something like eco. Now, with the brand recognition that companies will have already received from the compassionate economy, I'm trying to find specifically, and this is just for the sake of vetting the idea, what is it inside eco? Maybe I'm thinking of this wrong. I was thinking what inside eco will actually be of a specific benefit that the compassionate economy sign-on wouldn't be. But maybe I'm looking at this at the wrong level. Maybe I'm just not understanding. You're saying eco, for example, is not necessarily about some sort of brand new level of brand recognition. It will serve its own bit of brand recognition, but that's actually kind of an ancillary thing. The real benefit of places like eco will be you get out in front of government regulations, you get straight up in front of the public, right? The public doesn't go to the government and ask them what you're doing. The public comes to you and asks you what you're doing. Yeah. So much closer public relations ties with the public, obviously. Mm-hmm. So those are two clear benefits I've got out of this. Are there any others that you want to share? Or did I miss the point?
No. You're pretty much on target. We've been exploring the possibility of eco being the institution which confers the designation of compassionate company on those companies that choose to be part of the compassionate economy in the cannabis and hemp industry.
Okay.
So eco would be right there front and center having this relationship, because it's the organization which is going to be interacting with all these different cannabis and hemp companies anyway.
Okay, I messed up my routing. It goes from compassionate economy to the sub-organization, and then they give the designation to the individual company.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
But it's got to filter through eco or whatever. Okay, understood.
That's how I'm thinking of it now, but that may change, that may evolve. But bottom line, it's a partnership between the Compassionate Economy Foundation and eco.
Okay.
Which does the implementation, but really, so the conversations at the level of the entire compassionate economy happening on spectral radius, and those which are specific to cannabis and hemp, those conversations form a dialectic learning machine between, right, from the big macro global level of spanning all industries to the specific local level of one industry. And really, there's going to be a really big benefit to the first cannabis and hemp companies which get on board with this and become part of the conversation, is that because these conversations are recorded on video, and many of them will go viral, and the whole, this whole story of this dimensionally enhanced social network, and these ongoing conversations on multiple topics, and the spawning of new topics, and this big network brain that we talked about earlier, right? That will enable these participating companies to be seen as thought leaders, not only in the cannabis and hemp industry, but thought leaders with respect to the entire compassionate economy. You're going to see these cannabis and hemp companies as being the thought leaders.
Good.
And that's part of the story. It's like, wow, it's the cannabis people who are figuring out how to solve the world's problems, and they're starting with world hunger, and they're going from there.
So this serves a double purpose. Correct me if I'm wrong here. This serves a double purpose. It serves triple purpose maybe. It serves a specific goal that you have of seeing this industry flourish. It serves in gaining attention to the compassionate economy wider program in its infancy, but it also serves once the next one that you wish to sign up with, specialty foods, for example.
Yeah.
Once they see the effectiveness that the cannabis industry had through eco, it would tip over onto them real quick. So it primes the pump for the next one.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
Because if we approach them right now, they'd be like, we already have 1% for the earth. We have XYZ, right? Why do we want to sign up with another? You'd say, well, come a year, 2 years, hopefully not, from now, you'd say, well, look at the reputation of the cannabis industry. The cannabis industry. I turn that around.
Yeah. No, and here's the thing, but there's a much more direct way that it impacts them, which is that where we go, the media spotlight will follow.
Okay.
We will be squarely in the media spotlight, and so when we go to specialty foods and say, "Hello, food industry, we're doing a press release, and we've got companies A, B, C, D, and E here, leaders in their respective categories." A lot of these would be progressive, organic, and non-GMO and whatnot food companies. You know, certified humane, fair trade, all that good stuff. And these are the companies. What's going to happen? The market share of those companies is going to increase, right? And they'll become controversial and talked about, and it'll be like new Coke versus Pepsi all over again, right? Those companies that get involved and step into the circle, right? They're going to be leaders, and they're going to get tremendous benefits. And many other, it'll be like a stampede, and so many other companies will follow, because the moment that Whole Foods becomes a compassionate retailer, thousands of their suppliers are going to immediately feel pressure to become compassionate companies too. They're all going to sign up, and it's just going to become the in thing to do in specialty foods. And then we make it the in thing to do in the auto industry. And then we make it the in thing to do in the aerospace industry. And then we make it the in thing to do in the building materials industry. Are you building your house out of compassionate materials? Right? It's important. Very important. You know, people eating or starving depends on it. Literally depends on it. Because no one else has provided a vehicle for ending world hunger. And you see, that becomes a giant, giant, giant asset for us, is the fact that we're the only organization in the world to create a viable path to ending world hunger in just a few years. A few short years. We're going to end world hunger. We can make that big, bold statement. There is no one else who can make that statement. So, you know, that gives us so much media power that wherever we take it, we first take it to the cannabis and hemp industry, boom, right? And there's a story upon a story upon a story, right, of cannabis and hemp, the compassionate economy, the networked brain, and the rapid evolution of the foundation of the industry, the reinventing of the industry. That's setting an example for other industries. Follow us to the specialty food industry. But before we go there, we're starting with the implementation of this locally in Seattle and creating the first compassionate city in the world. Seattle, the world's first compassionate city, right? And so while we're doing that with the flyby and the deliveries to the homeless and the hungry and everything else, and school food programs and after-school programs and boom, 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 simultaneously we're off on the specialty food industry over there. And by the way, we're bringing them in to participate in the local deliveries, you know, in the acquisition of and delivery of food to the homeless and the hungry. Right? So we bring them all in. I mean, you see the tight coupling that's going on here? You know, it's like a covalently bonded molecule, right? With really tight double, triple bonds. We're bringing in all these pillars together. And this will become the use story in the world. And so this becomes the vehicle for shepherding the world through use of the media and through strategic alignment with specific industries, cannabis and hemp and specialty foods and technology, with flyby, et cetera, et cetera. So with all of this, we're creating this juggernaut of a guiding light, of a true north, and saying, this is the direction we need to go. Hello, world, this is the direction we're going. Not only is this direction we need to go, this is the direction we're going. And you can either get ahead of the wave, become part of the wave, or be paddling furiously behind the wave trying to catch up, you know, if you're seen as a laggard who doesn't get on board with it. So it just becomes this thing where there's urgency. And no urgency, no sale. This creates massive urgency to get on board quickly and maximize your return if you're a private company that cares about returns for shareholders. And if you do, this is a great vehicle. This is an essential vehicle to get on. And the sooner you get on board, the better the returns.
Thinking. I'm once again just furiously taking notes about other stuff I want to discuss in the corner. Understood. So do you think there was another topic specifically we wanted to transition to? Because I think we've explained this particular thread. You look like you've gotten some notes yourself there.
Yeah. Well, we're still at the brainstorming stage of what it means to have a compassionate um, economy, and what we would want the future to look like, that we can review for a bit. So there are these attributes which we can just sort of think of as utopian attributes, where everyone is nourished, everyone has basic housing and healthcare and education and safety and human rights and whatnot, and that the economy be characterized by an ongoing shepherding function, shepherding people and institutions towards the compassionate path. And we've identified the compassionate economy 1.0 as an example of one of those structures, the 0.1% contribution. And the marketing and PR, feedbacks and benefits to those companies associated with that. That guides companies to be compassionate, right? It rewards them for being. It rewards compassion. I think that's a key term. It should reward compassion. The compassionate economy rewards compassion. So, and this may sound really mind-boggling, but in a well-developed compassionate economy, the most prosperous, successful companies are the most compassionate. So it creates a tight correlation between compassion and profitability. I mean, why the heck not? And so we've talked about one example is the early adopters of the compassionate company designation, or the early adopters of the compassionate economy, or the first members, will get a massively disproportionate amount of the marketing and PR and goodwill benefit for their getting on board. Also, smaller companies will have a disproportionately large benefit because they'll be able to tell their story, if anything, more loud and clear than a larger company that has to go through so many different filters of review of any information that's going to be released to the public about the company. It's got to go through legal, it's got to go through marketing, and by the time you're done, it's marketing by committee, and you just get a bunch of soggy oatmeal, messaging, which is what Microsoft routinely churns out, for example. But a startup, no, it's like, yeah, here's what we're about, boom, 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 big and bold and proud, and wow, and of course that's the exciting stuff. So the smaller the company, the earlier they get on, the more the benefit they're going to get, and so the world is going to get this massive dose. I keep getting into tactics here, and but I think it's important to highlight that these very tactics, which will very rapidly, I mean, think of how quickly we're going to get the world to get onto this compassionate path, on the path of ending world hunger, right? It's going to make people's heads spin because it's going to be the #1 story in the world. Companies are going to be stampeding to be among the first companies in their category, in their industry. So, like, the canned vegetables category, is it going to be, Del Monte, or is it going to be the Green Giant, or, who's going to be the brand to be the first compassionate canned produce, right? It's gonna help the first company. I mean, because they'll be able to do a whole advertising campaign around it, a whole marketing campaign. The first compassionate soup. Not only do we care about what you eat, we care about what everyone eats. We're a compassionate soup company. Right? Period. Boom. I mean, it can apply to any category, any industry, any company can leverage this. Local merchants, local restaurants are going to get on board because they want to be among those highlighted first in the media for being compassionate restaurants. Duh. Welcome flyby, welcome volunteers. Here's our, surplus food. Take it away. Right? Take it to those who need it. We don't want to throw it away. We want to give it. We want every calorie to be utilized. Why the heck not? Right? So we're creating a massive global movement. The tactics, we're using marketing. We're using the same exact tactics that companies have used, but we're using them in really dimensionally enhanced ways because we're creating a story, which is a compound story of all these different elements: the compassionate economy, the network brain through the dimensionally enhanced social network, which we haven't talked about too much on Hangouts, but hopefully people are able to fill in the blanks. And the cannabis and hemp industry, ending world hunger, the specialty food industry. It's like boom, boom, boom. There's just each one of those is a mega story in and of itself. But the mega fusion of all of that is like a fusion between Japanese, Mexican, Thai, German, and it turns out to be just absolutely delicious, right? You get the very best of each. Why not?
Actually, it does sound delicious.
Doesn't it?
You're making me hungry.
Shit, I'm making myself hungry. But anyway, we're creating this fusion of topics that's just going to be mind-boggling. But it's all integrated into one common thread. You boil it down to one simple word, which is compassion, and everybody's going to be on board with that. Who does not want more compassion in their life and in the world?
I think a majority of people do. Some people will say that they do publicly and don't privately, but then once again, that's what we said. You do have to align yourself, or you don't have to, but it could be advantageous to align yourself with the opponent. Seeking absolute purity in things can slow you down significantly. If Halliburton wants to join on, whatever, right?
Yeah,
actions in a way speak louder than words.
But here's the thing: the paying the 0.1% contribution, that's just the bare minimum. The real action is going to be in the conversation. The conversation on ecotoxin on spectral radius. Go ahead.
So I have a question. I was aligning with your idea about it's okay to align with the opponent. Let's say some companies who don't exactly profit off of very good things.
Yeah.
It's okay to align with those companies because they were donating the 0.1%.
Yeah.
However, if you have you were also mentioning, once again, we started discussing eco, and that's where compassionate economy, person needs to be sub-organization certified, and then they are actually certified in that particular vein. Now, that will drive a lot of companies who were able to give their 0.1%.
Yeah.
A lot of companies won't be able to, like the cannabis industry, we're young and nimble, and that's fine. But larger companies like massive retailers and such, they won't be able to get on board with that because the costs of even abiding by any sort of compassion-based rules will just be too high.
Well, there's two factors here. One is the 0.1% contribution. The other is the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's walk before we run. Let's not presuppose we're going to have a whole bunch of restrictive rules that's going to automatically freeze out X sectors or percentage of the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I started to talk about this a few minutes ago. One way to make sure that we don't alienate or misalign with our core constituents is we're not going to suddenly just brashly create some set of standards for safety and require all this training and education and all this stuff and say this is the new standard, love it or leave it. No.
Mm-hmm.
The genesis of the standards of eco, and we want to set an example for other industries, the genesis of these standards will be these dimensionally enhanced conversations on ecotox in the case of the cannabis and hemp industry. So the real action is in the conversations on ecotox. You want to influence the cannabis and hemp industry, join the conversation.
Okay.
Right? You have strong feelings about whether education should be required or not, or under which circumstances, or what type of education. Okay, fine. Come with all of that. Bring it all to the conversation. Be thoughtful about how you introduce it to the conversation, and et cetera, but, bring it to the conversation. And these conversations are probably seldom going to be just neat and clean, right? There's a lot of stuff that needs to be put on the table. We've been needing to have these conversations for decades.
Yeah.
The conversations that we have had, you have them and they evaporate because they weren't recorded. Now, with the networked brain with perfect holographic memory, all these conversations are part of the memory of that network brain.
And so where do you think these conversations will lead in the end? Yeah.
Here's where they're going to lead. They're going to lead us onto an evolutionary path, right? Where a whole bunch of different peoples and different organizations, needs, interests, perceptions, desires, preferences, etc., are going to be expressed, are going to be considered, and ultimately we're going to determine a roadmap for the evolution of the foundation, a roadmap in terms of rules and regulations, internal eco-specific rules and regulations versus government regulations, because we're going to have input on both, right? These conversations will span both, and so basically, what you're going to see is an architected, not just static set of rules and regulations. Here's what it should be, but an architected evolutionary pathway, right, with a foundation of evolution and dimensionally enhanced conversation, which is what we're having right now, and basically a framework that explicitly acknowledges the power of the network brain and the dimensionally enhanced social network, basically using Google Hangouts and having them broadcast, recorded, but also categorized according to topic, subtopic, etc., through the brain software or whatever interface. That the foundation explicitly acknowledges the power of that framework, of that network brain. So you have network brain from above. You have the guiding principles of the compassionate economy from below as the true foundation. What are our guiding principles, which is what we're having this conversation about now. And then in the middle, you have all these specific topics and subtopics, industries, other industries, relationships between industries, and what will be forming over time through the application of all of these assets is a richer and richer model of the world, how it works, where we're taking the world, where we want to take the world, and how we need to refine the management of our activity, industry by industry, category by category, geography by geography, such that we meet all of these needs and objectives, making sure everyone is nourished, making sure that life on Earth is sustainable for future generations, making sure that we're managing the world's scarce resources in a responsible way that's consistent with the long-term plan for the planet, et cetera, et cetera. That's where all this is heading, is a very intelligently, optimally evolved plan or pathway for the planet. And when I say plan, not so much that, but more an optimized economy and structures and institutions to keep the world on a healthy, sustainable pathway. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did. Okay. Well, so that's wow. Well, I guess one would never expect a person to be quite so honest about such a large end goal that might step on so many toes. Well, I guess about such a large end goal in general. Okay. Yeah, that did answer the question.
And in terms of stepping on toes, that's actually a good thing, because I mean, in the service of making this the #1 story in the world, as this becomes the #1 story, it's going to be controversial. People will feel like their toes are being stepped on because, hey, why didn't you ask me to be a part of this? And finding that I've been saying this for years, nobody was listening, because a lot of these things have been said for a long time by a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And so, the cannabis and hemp part of it is controversial in and of itself. The ending of world hunger, carrying capacity of the planet, overpopulation. These are all very controversial topics that are interconnected. And the fact that we're making such a big, bold claim, and so many people are joining in this claim that we're going to end world hunger by the end of the decade, in anywhere near the magnitude that we see it today. All of this will make it very controversial. Will help make it a big story, and in fact, the very story part of it, and the nature of that conversation that will be happening at the level of ecotoxin, at the level of spectral radius, because those conversations will be so massively dimensionally enhanced over and above traditional media and traditional conversations that happen and evaporate and happen and evaporate and happen and evaporate, and as a result you get a whole bunch of repetition because you're not building on a solid foundation of perfect holographic memory. Since this conversation is recorded, we're building upon a solid foundation of perfect holographic memory. No, I thought you said this. No, I thought you were saying that. We'll just replay it. What did I say? Right? And and again, we're going to find increasingly sophisticated ways of summarizing, condensing, a 4-hour conversation into a 3-minute summary, right, or a 1 paragraph. You can build on top of it, but also drill down so that if you're worried about oversimplifying, and just go deep, expand it, do the whole thing, think about it. Right? So the very fact of the dimensionally enhanced social network, the very concept of it, and the power of what we're going to be able to do with it, keep in mind, and this is a very hard thing for us to contemplate because we've traditionally been the most intelligent species on the planet, but we're now creating a vastly more intelligent species than our own, which is the species of the network brain. Operating on top of an operating system of a dimensionally enhanced social network. The dimensionally enhanced social network becomes the operating system. That, combined with the human activity and contributions and conversations, becomes the network brain that lives there. So, I mean, that is because the fact that that's going to be a vastly more powerful intelligence than any intelligence we've ever experienced before. What that intelligence is going to be able to tackle problems which were previously considered intractable and now seen as trivial. It takes intractable problems and turns them into trivial problems. That is so profound. I mean, it's like the analogy of the dog looking at a piece of paper that has calculus on it. There's no way in heck the dog's going to figure it out. It simply doesn't have the intelligence. But to the human, who has been properly trained in mathematics, that's trivial. That's a trivial problem. It's easily to explain. Blah, 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 piece of cake. Likewise, we're going to go from this limited human brain capacity that we have now to the network brain, with combined with the dimensionally enhanced social network of Google Hangout and YouTube, right? And voila, we're going to be able to transform problems that were just like ending war. That's a tough problem. Ending hunger, that's a piece of cake. You raise the money, you deploy it properly, and people are fed. And agriculture is developed, and desertification is being reversed, and we're on a long-term path. And bottom line, you've ended world hunger. Not a problem, right? We're going to do that. It's going to be a slam dunk, and it's going to be part of the foundation, which will enable us to, continue to provide the goodness that we're providing to impact other issues. But the single biggest one will be the network brain. That intelligence is going to transform all these other problems in record time. Right?
And having something like a brain, I think the intelligence would be the thing accessing it. So you have that brain as a big lump of information.
No, it's not just information. It's information and the live human brains that are plugged into it. That's what the network brain is.
Okay. And they're all working. I guess those things actually become a brain if the brain tries to do something, so they'd be assigned a problem. And the connection of humans inside that network, the brain, as it were, would figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. The network brain will be able to figure out all this stuff. And And also artificial intelligence will be brought into play, but it'll be much more human-centric than I think than the Kurzweilian predictions. And that's that, for me, that's actually really exciting. That the heart of this ultra-powerful networked brain, because I mean, artificial intelligence, I don't know, I just see it as, like, for example, in doing, you know, large-scale network optimization problems, we need computers, right? Human brains just don't have what it takes. But I think to transform these interconnected global transformational issues that we have, I think it's going to take human brains coming together in the networked brain, operating within, using the dimensionally enhanced social network to transform these issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, if you have a problem, you need to know what's going on, and you need to have as many ideas as possible. You need to have the best ideas in order to solve it.
Yeah.
And to have the best ideas, you need to have tons of ideas and distill them down to the best ideas. So having a bunch of different people affords you different viewpoints, so you get a clear picture of reality, and it affords you different viewpoints. Different viewpoints of reality and fact, and then it affords you, I guess you could say, the best common denominator of ideas once boiled down to try to resolve that based upon those facts. Where usually, you know, people have their own little facts and those get all twisted. The internet's allowed individuals to do this non-collaboratively inside their own brains. I think that's why maybe stuff like this is even possible nowadays. But, you know, people have their own viewpoints and then they have their own opinions. But I've noticed this is why I'm almost addicted to browsing the internet. It's because I see tons of different viewpoints and I see tons of different people's ideas for how to resolve problems. And I feel like I've turned into a new person in my brain basically every 6 months for the past 3 years. It's been awesome, and I love the feeling of transformation. This will take that and then wrap it all in. There's an idea to be done here. All of you get together, and all of you submit this. And then the best ideas and best values, or best vision of reality and best way to resolve problems will just result in a bunch of things shaking their way up to the top. And the system will select the best ones. I'm assuming that that's how it works.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Just once again to restate it, as I've been restating things a lot this discussion.
No, that's good. That's good. It helps for clarity. So I think that, you know, the full power of this networked brain will probably only really start to be felt when we have several hundred members, several hundred actively participating members. I actually think it'll become kind of addictive in a sense, because I mean, just like it's very refreshing to have conversations with brilliant people, and that it's like, wow, finally I get to, you know, use my brain at a very high level. This will enabling people to tap into this vast intelligence of the network brain, meaning talk about whatever you want to talk about right now, whatever's most important to you. There's a conversation going on about that, and if there isn't, create it, right? And, you know, promote it, whatever you need to do, you know, and we'll have mechanisms for all that, and then you know, and the fact that they'll be able to listen to other conversations and get up to speed and participate in those, and like there'll just be so many brilliant people with hearts of gold working on so many different aspects of all these projects. It's like finally there's a place for us to do this. And that's the cool thing. We create a space to be able to do this. So that is, it's almost like it kind of trumps a lot of the other stuff that we've been working on planning, because by creating the network brain, it's like, you know, it's like if I have 8 hours to chop down a tree, right? I'm gonna spend the first 6 hours sharpening the axe, and because by creating a well-architected network brain, that becomes like an infinitely sharp axe. It can cut through any issues, any problems that can be stated. Any problem that can be articulated by one person can be solved by the network brain. That should be like a theorem. It's kind of like saying, hey, any problem that can be articulated by a dog can be solved by a human because it's a higher intelligence, right? The dog sees some meat and barks and wants to eat it. The human can resolve that. The networked brain will be able to resolve any problem that any human can articulate. I don't know. That's a prediction, right? I mean, if it can be, well, I don't know. Well, whatever. But you get the idea. Is that you have something so powerful that it will be able to resolve these problems which had stymied us for decades.
I wouldn't actually second guess yourself. I've noticed the same thing. When you start thinking about something clearly, solutions are actually not that complex. In everything from solutions in engineering and hardcore theoretical science to political solutions to value-based solutions, which are one and the same, to logistical solutions. I've yet to think of something. Let's roll out the farthest domains of absurdity right now, but I've yet to think of something that I could not imagine a single person with enough time and resources actually resolving, let alone a group of people who, as I said, are scouring reality, gathering facts and observations, and generating ideas, because that's all that human brains do, right? Gather facts and ideas from one perspective and generate ideas and bringing them all together.
And here's the thing. The crucial difference between what we're doing now and what the Internet does generally is the Internet is text-based, and there's this big, long lag time between putting an idea out there and getting some feedback. Here, the lag time is seconds. In the blogosphere, the hours or days, right? That's why I call this a dimensionally enhanced social network, and it's a critical part of the network brain. The perfect holographic memory is one part of it, but the instantaneity of feedback is what's going to make this just the most powerful thing on Earth. And, even a few months from now, with a powerful network brain chugging away, the solutions that we came up with for, compassionate economy version 1.0 and cannabis and hemp being a part of, all that's going to be seen as just trivial, right? For a higher intelligence, right? It's going to be seen as trivial. And we're going to be on to really exciting stuff. So I think this has been awesome. I'd like to motion we adjourn pretty soon here.
Okay.
But I see you're deep in thought. Any other things you want to talk about related to all this?
I'd like it if we could take some stuff immediately after the discussion, but we can make it fairly quick. For now, I think we've covered most of the stuff we set out to do inside this, which is to come up with an overall mission statement for the compassionate economy, and I guess possibly to just kind of elucidate how else it fits in with the other sub-organizations, such as ECO that we were talking about. We actually ended up covering even more ground than I thought in getting into the networked brain.
Yeah. Now the thing is, I'm just blown away. I haven't really, until this conversation, I haven't really thought so deeply about the implications of the network brain. But basically, properly architected, that thing is going to solve. It's going to be the platform for solving all these issues, for transforming all these issues. Way bigger, more powerful than what we could do just without it. Let's build the brain. Let's spend the first 6 hours sharpening the axe. Build that network brain, and then put it to use.
Agreed.
And that's gonna, dude, life on Earth is just gonna be completely unrecognizable. We're kind of like a bunch of cavemen wondering what it's going to be like once the first Intel chip is produced. Good luck predicting that. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about creating the network brain. I don't know if you get how profound that is, Phil. You get it?
Let's say I do. I've had a bunch of time. I've had a ton of time to consider stuff like this. My deciding to finally join the foray into the cannabis industry was a direct result of not being able to sit still anymore at a 9-to-5 and finally wanting to be part of it. So let's just say this, the cavemen probably had a hell of an imagination, but reality always has new ways of surprising you. So suffice it to say, I'm just curious as to what it's going to look like, and I think it's about 3 decades overdue from happening. So I just want to get it done, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're forming the first synapses for the network brain right now as we speak. With every word we speak, we're creating more synapses. Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool? Mm-hmm. These are the first synapses of the brain. So consider yourself very privileged.
I'm a brain.
All right, man. Anything else?
No, I think that wraps it up for here. Good talk, though. And thanks for giving me so much feedback on this.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, I'll call you in a second then.
Okay, cool. Take care.